Can I just stand here?
Author Tavis Smiley.
Because I do this every day for a living, I really have a deep and abiding appreciation for researchers. Whoever your research team is, they did their job.
There were other artists who maintained the commercial side of their career as well as being involved in the movement. And Nina, that the commercial side was not something that she was nurturing at that time. She was all in the movement. And so when she felt betrayed by the movement and when so many leaders were lost, she left and she was gone, and of course she was struggling with demons, both outside and inside, and so she did withdraw in that time. And I think the enigma is that. I think also as a woman and as a black woman at that time, she was a performer like people hadn't seen before, and that was a role that was uncomfortable for people. People didn't know how, talking directly to the audience and demanding attention and respect. A woman hadn't done that before. They had been up there performing and entertaining, and it was a rare and difficult position, and I think that increased our sense of a lack of understanding and that enigmatic nature that you're talking about, because she challenged our assumptions.
This is an impossible question, so...
Excellent.
Thanks. Not the first or the last one I would ask. And I say impossible not because you aren't gifted enough to take a stab at it, but because neither of us are professionals in this regard. But I could not help, and I'm curious to get to the audience question to see if they felt the same way. I could not help but wrestle with this notion of, is this chicken egg thing? Which came first? Her mania or the contestation of her humanity? I'm watching this film, and clearly she was wrestling, as you said, with some demons. But sometimes that is brought on by a society that contests your dignity, that contests your humanity. And I wonder if you have thoughts about which came first, the mania or in that era, who did not have the kind of courage and conviction and commitment and character to take the kind of risk that she took. What do you make of her doing that in that era, not just as an African-American, as an African-American woman?
Yeah. Well, the early experience that Nina talks about of her parents being moved to the back of the room where she's playing and her refusal to play at that moment. I mean, this is the Jim Crow South. I mean, people were killed for much less than that.
That's right.
And that bravery right there of demanding justice in this very small way as a very small child, again, that you could have been killed for that. No.
I've begun to completely rethink my appreciation and value of her and for her as a songwriter, as a lyricist. What say you about the way we need to re-examine our view of her as a songwriter?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was the time, right, where people started authoring their own material. She was like part of that movement in the late 50s and early 60s, and then I think it was the civil rights movement that that pushed her towards that. I mean, writing Mississippi Goddamn, which she says she wrote 10 minutes, in this kind of this kind of outrage and amazing artistic outpouring, and that when she wrote, it came out of those. I suppose, mania is like the negative word of it, but like this incredible passion that she had. And yeah, she did a lot of covers, but the other thing about her covers, I think, is that she completely, we say it in the film, but she completely owns and remakes these songs as well.
End up having a deeper and more radical kind of empathy for the plight of other people. So it wasn't just the king was sympathetic, he didn't pity people. Not even just the king was empathetic, which is to say, putting himself in the shoes of other people, but he developed a radical kind of empathy, born of his mania. When you think about it, it actually makes some sense. I wonder if you think that's partly what allowed Nina to have such a radical kind of empathy for the suffering of other people, that it was connected, in fact, to her own mania, what she was dealing with.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that her, the depth of her emotion and how much pain she felt, personally, was something that, she channeled in music and people felt understood, and, that, she was able to reach people so deeply because you felt that range of her experience, and, if you had felt something bad, she was there with you in that sense.
Where she's allowing a man to put his hands on her repeatedly. That juxtaposition was difficult. And again, I'm not naive in asking that, but your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think Nina, I don't know, I think there's so many different ways to attack and answer that question. And, part of it was, Nina looking for, she had this, this life, this idea of a life that was kind of taken from her when her classical music career, which she'd been training for her entire life, was taken away from her. And here was this man, and that was something that obviously pulled her in. And I think to be divorced and to in the early '60s, it was just not something that that was common or easy to do. And I think that probably there was a lot of social pressure against that. And also, as we saw in Nina's letters, she said, I love physical violence. There was part of her that was drawn to that. And is that part of the mental illness? And then I think, of course, we know that the dynamics in domestic violence are very, very complicated. And I think it's a very long analysis and conversation. Not entirely, but largely. She surrounded herself. There were a lot of white men around her, more so than women, white women or black women. Not true. In Mount Vernon, in the community, when they were living in Mount Vernon, there was a very, very solid community there. But on the road, right, it was a lot of white men. And I think at the end of her life, with those guys who were taking care of her, there were some power dynamics at play that were troubling. And we touch on that a bit in the film. In terms, Nina, it was really hard for Nina to work, and there were people making money off of her who needed her to work, and that was. But at the same time, work for her was part of what sustained her. So it's a very, very complicated thing. And then there was a racial dynamic there as well, because a lot of the guys making money were white men.
One last question for the audience for the last 10 minutes. I was just tickled by the fact that they lived next door. Who knew? It was just the most fascinating thing for me. What do you make then of the role? And I want to just ask this question, the macro version of this question. What do you make of the role that community played in her success?
Yeah, that community in Mount Vernon, it was like Stokely and Mary McCabe were coming over, and Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee were over there, and of course the Shabazz were there. There was this, sort of extraordinary, vibrant, Langston Hughes was around, James Baldwin, everybody was there. I think, that was her political education, because she became, through Lorraine Hansberry, she became educated in Marxism and socialist thought. And that was, Lorraine was, I think, her real intellectual mentor and best female friend for Nina during that period of time. And then the Shabazzes were like this family, the kind of extended family for Lisa, who was this lonely child who was alone a lot. So that community was huge. And I think, when Nina left and everything left, after that was a huge loss. The diaries and notes and photos came from many, many different sources. A lot of them came from Lisa, her daughter, who after Nina died, she took everything out of her house in France and kind of took it into storage. And so some of the letters and items were owned by collectors. Well, I think the cost to her is clear, right? I think we all see that and feel that the cost to her was everything, except she did live, she did survive, which many didn't. But can you think of others who were that entirely devoted?
No, Belafonte was on the list, absolutely.
Harry Belafonte read it, and he continued and continues.
It still does, yeah.
Yeah.